Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC, the Chautauqua Institution, and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.
Hello and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Dan Malthrop, Chief Executive here and a proud member. It's July 31st and you're with a virtual City Club forum, but we're actually live from the City Club itself. Hooray. Last night, the NBA restarted with more than a nod to the Black Lives Matter movement. That phrase, Black Lives Matter, was on the floor of the court and on the jerseys players wore as they took a knee, all of them, during the national anthem at two separate games. 2 months ago, after George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis by a man who at the time was a Minneapolis police officer, the Cleveland Cavaliers put out a statement. Here's part of it. We believe all for one really does mean all. Thus, all of us, both individually and as organizations and communities, have a responsibility to speak up and try to influence and help end horrible situations and outcomes like this. Let's all respond with a sense of urgency and a deeper determination to make life better and work towards a world where everyone feels safe. Today we're going to talk about what that statement means in practice. We've got coaching and front office leadership from the organization today. Koby Altman, General Manager of the Cleveland Cavaliers, is with us, along with J.B. Bickerstaff, he's head coach, and Kevin Clayton, Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion and Community Engagement for the Cavs. And full disclosure, Kevin just joined our board here at the City Club. He was elected at a meeting on Tuesday, so congratulations and welcome to you, sir. And welcome to you as well, Coach and General Manager Koby Altman. As in every City Club forum, you get to participate with your questions. You can text them to 330-541-5794. That's 330-541-5794. And you can also tweet them at the City Club. We will work them into the program. Koby, Coach, Kevin, thanks for joining us. It is great to see you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for having us.
Right now there would be a bunch of applause. So it's so funny to be here. But it's great to have you, and this is a great reason to open up our doors again, and we're all sitting here socially distant. Coach, last night the NBA restarted, and as I said, Black Lives Matter was front and center. It was center court, not exactly center court, off to the side center court, but it was really front and center stage. What were you thinking as you were watching the games?
I was proud, to be honest with you. For the league in its a whole, for it to mean as much as them that they would put that on the court. Like, you think about how much they sell sponsorship rights and logos on the court, and for them to go past that and put Black Lives Matter on the court for everybody to see, it shows the amount of support that they have for the players. You know what I mean? Like, the players have been marching, they've been protesting, they've been using their voice, and it's always great to have the support and the power that the NBA brings behind you.
Koby Altman, it's a long way, last night, a long way from Colin Kaepernick taking a knee on his own, from other players, individual players wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt or jersey when they're warming up. How did you feel?
I think it was an incredible show of unity from the league and the NBA. And, we have a unique opportunity as a league. When you think about, our athletes are some of the most famous African Americans in the world. So we have this global stage, and we have a chance to spread the message, open up dialogue, and that's really what Colin was doing back then, Kaepernick, is he wanted to create a dialogue. And whether you agree with kneeling for the national anthem or not, that was an incredibly powerful statement that our guys did, along with the coaches, along with the front office, along with all of the NBA. And it's going to be an iconic moment of 2020 as well, of all the images that we're seeing this year. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a very powerful moment in our history. And again, it's to open the dialogue of social injustice. And so, like Coach, I was proud, but I was moved at the same time. And I think our fans across the world saw that as a pivotal moment. And we got to keep the momentum going and keep the movement going.
Kevin Clayton, you've been in this work for most of your career, diversity and inclusion on behalf of large corporations and now on behalf of the Cleveland Cavaliers. That must have been something to see Black Lives Matter painted on the court itself and on every single jersey.
Yeah, you know, Dan, for me it was the support, as Coach said, from a league level. So as you mentioned, I've been involved with this work from the largest of companies, nonprofits, and oftentimes statements are made, comments are made, but there's nothing that goes behind it. And what last night did for me, it actually cemented the fact that, yes, the league is 100% behind this movement. They have taken a part of humanity that is under siege right now and said, we're going to support the Black community. And that walks the talk, which is absolutely what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's people listening and watching right now who are, you know, the whole spectrum of points of view about Black Lives Matter, and there's still people, I still come across people who still don't understand why the words together are being used, why people are taking a knee. They think that taking a knee is disrespectful. And Kevin, I just want to ask you to just summarize, just make the case, help people understand.
Sure. So I was fortunate to have done some work back with Dr. Bernice King and the King Center when Black Lives Matter was formed, and this was in response to the Trayvon Martin killing. And it was an opportunity for the Black community to bring light to the systemic racist issues that are really keeping the Black community kind of segregated from the rest of the population base by systemic racism. So the statement Black Lives Matter actually is a part of humanity that is under siege, as I said. And as we hear, it was like, all lives matter. Well, yeah, all lives do matter. But how can all lives matter if Black lives don't matter? So the statement itself really talks to, here's part of our population that needs support, holistic support. And we're going to focus on that part of the population. That's no different than any other demographic group being under siege as well. But right now, and if you look across multiple systems, let it be education, let it be health, law enforcement, judicial, incarceration, all of those systems, you'll see disparities with the African American community. So this is really an outreach of saying, we, all of humanity, are going to wrap our arms around the Black community. It's not to say other lives don't matter. It's saying right now, the Black community needs support.
Right, right. So let me just say, if you're just joining us, you're with the City Club Friday Forum. I'm Dan Malthrop. Kevin Clayton was just speaking. He is the Vice President for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement at the Cleveland Cavaliers. Coach J.B. Bickerstaff is with us as well, along with Koby Altman, General Manager. Coach Bickerstaff, you're wearing a pin that says Coaches for Racial Justice. Tell me about that.
Well, obviously, you know, it kind of spurred from the George Floyd murder. We had a group of coaches who were extremely passionate about wanting to do something. And it was, you know, one phone call led to another phone call, and then that phone call led to all 30 head coaches in the NBA on a Zoom discussing this. And the topic began with, how do we approach our assistant coaches or our younger coaches who might not feel comfortable speaking out, or they need support and they might not be getting support. And then it turned into, well, we have large voices in 30 markets. You know, how can we do our best to impact our markets? So we formed a subcommittee to kind of lead the way. And, you know, what we tried to do is start working with grassroots groups in each of those 30 NBA markets. And you think about the cities that we reach, right? They're big time cities. And what we're trying to do now is implement sustainable programs that it's not a flash in a pan. You know, this won't be healed overnight. So we're committed for the long run. We're trying to get into our communities, understand the different problems that our communities face in those different markets, and then figure out a way to solve them. And what our motion has been is, you know, there was this huge frustration as a group that, you know, we're extremely passionate about things in our society for 2 days. Then the news cycle flips, and then we go on to something else. So our focus was, how do we make this long-lasting and sustainable? And we wanted to be consistent with our effort, and hopefully that spreads over to our communities as well.
Do you think that part of what what has kept the protests going, what has made the attention, has sustained some of the attention, was the fact that you weren't, I mean, for you could focus on this. You had no basketball games to coach. We had no basketball games to watch. And there was no baseball to watch. And there was, was that, do you think that was part of what was going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, all of this is part of the perfect storm to finally focus our attention, as a nation on an issue that, we should have been focusing on long ago. Mm-hmm. And, people weren't going to work. People were staying home. People were now allowed to watch the news and educate themselves on the reasons why we are where we are today. And then again, that education and understanding leads to the passion that we're seeing and people wanting to do more and create change that's long lasting.
And let's not forget the horrific image of 8 minutes and 46 seconds of a police officer's knee on the back of George Floyd's neck. I mean, that was an image that we all had to grapple with as a society. And that horrific image, we couldn't let pass as a moment in society. And everybody was outraged. Everybody felt that they need to learn and understand and grapple with this problem more and be a part of the solution. So like Coach said, it was a perfect storm, but that image was different. And that image, and amount of time that you had to watch that was really difficult to process, and everybody had to process that and figure out, okay, what's next? What do we do to solve this problem?
Koby Altman, when you and Coach got together to write that statement that you were ready to put out, and then the organization put out an additional statement that I quoted at the beginning of the program, one of the things that you both wrote was, this is not the first time that we've had to stand together in an attempt to impact change, but this could be the first time we actually do create change for all of humanity. Do you still feel that? Do you still feel that we're on our way to actually doing something?
Yeah, so, it's interesting. We're fortunate because we're from the top down. Dan Gilbert, who's our chairman and owner, gives us the support to tackle these diversity and inclusion issues. And before the George Floyd murder, we were already starting to grapple with some of these uncomfortable issues as a team and as an organization. We're fortunate enough, and the coaches are fortunate enough to work with Brian Stevenson, who's the famous attorney that works to get African Americans off death row, and more than that, prove their innocence through the Innocence Project. They gave us a firsthand viewing of Just Mercy. And so the Just Mercy film, I would urge all of the listeners and watchers to watch that film, which I think is streaming on multiple different platforms. And so as an organization and as a team, early in the fall, we went to go see that film. And so that started a dialogue within our organization already, like, whoa, we need to focus more on the criminal justice system and the inequities of that. And so that played out, and we went on, and so it's a Represent Justice movement that he started. And so as a team and as an organization, almost all of our players and staff went to the Grafton Correctional Facility in Ohio and had a roundtable discussion with inmates. And those were tough conversations. Those were difficult conversations, but it gave us a platform to learn and grow.
What made those conversations so hard for you?
Well, one, first of all, we're all learning about the systemic racism that has happened in this country for years, and that 2.5 million Americans are incarcerated, which is double any country in the world, most of them being black and brown people, most of which are poor. And so we're learning from these inmates about their lack of access to healthcare, to education, access to a normal upbringing that gives them a chance to actually succeed in society, and how they had to start from that level and not even having a chance. And so that opportunity was incredible for us to learn and understand how privileged we are and how we need to help. And so after that, we actually played for justice. So that's part of a part of the campaign, and it gave our guys incredible joy to play in front of the inmates and to see, their faces light up when Colin Sexton is out there coaching and coaching these inmates to success on the basketball floor. And so we were already set up as a group, and Coach can attest to this, like when that moment happened with George Floyd, we were ready to have that conversation with our organization, with our players, and give them a safe space to talk. And we jumped on a Zoom call about 2 days afterwards, led by Coach, and it was remarkable. They were able to share their thoughts, their frustration, their hurt on this forum. And I think that's what we've done as an organization, is be able to create those moments of organizational growth and what's next. Mm-hmm. And so Kevin's done an incredible job of leading us to the what's next part, but we're all in on the commitment to make change here.
Yeah. Dan, may I just
Kevin Clayton, go ahead.
Around the question you said as well, around what made those conversations tough.
Yeah.
We were watching, in some cases, I'm saying really from not a direct standpoint, but we were looking at our brothers, we were looking at our neighbors, we were looking at our cousins, our fathers, and quite honestly, we were looking at, if it were not for us being somewhat privileged by maybe making a choice, a different choice, that could have been any of the three of us. Mm-hmm. So it's real when you hear these young men talking about how a bad decision they made changed their life, and they were incarcerated for a number of years. So that made it tough for us as well, because we could internalize it and we could see people that we grew up with also in that circle.
Kevin, I think there's a lot of white America that doesn't understand what you're saying, in that, like, it could have been you, but for slightly different circumstances, like really slightly different circumstances. And I want to ask you to just say a little bit more about that, because oftentimes you'll hear white people say, well, it's about choices. People make choices, those are consequences. And they don't really understand or don't see the underlying structures that mean that if that a black teenager and a white teenager maybe make the same dumb decision, and the black teenager winds up, behind bars, and the white teenager is like, he's just being a kid.
Yep. So Dan, as you know, I grew up here in Cleveland, and I'll offer a very personal example. So I grew up in the Lee Harvard area, which is not the best areas of Cleveland on the east side, with a single mom that actually saw at a very young age, when I was in the 4th grade, she was like, I'm going to do whatever I can do to move us into Shaker Heights. And for those of us that know, there's a part of Shaker that is kind of the black part of Shaker, and then it's that is 2-family homes, 3-family homes, and me growing up in a 2-family home, for us we had 4 rooms, and we moved for 4 straight years because the landlord went up on the rent, and I'm not exaggerating, one time it was $10 a month. But because my mother she didn't have the opportunity to really increase her wages, we moved 3 doors down to another home. And the purpose of that, I'm saying, is if she had not made that choice to sacrifice for my education, the reason we moved is to get me out of that environment into a community that has a better education system, that has a better neighborhood, if you will. I have no idea what my life would have been like. And that was an economic choice, it was an education choice, it was a quality of life choice that was made. So just that one decision that I didn't make, but my mother made it for me, gave me an opportunity to have a better education, to then have an opportunity to actually survive at a point where I am now.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things coming from that conversation was how many of the men said that they had a sense of hopelessness as they were being brought up. And they had no way out. And so they had to make some decisions to either support their family, eat that night, or what have you. But they made that decision, and it ended up leading to incarceration. And what people need to understand is that the oppression is real. The fact that public schools are funded different by area codes it says a lot about our society and the systemic racism that we talk about. If you're not afforded the same education because you live 30 minutes away from another kid, you're gonna be put a step behind in the race. And then you're constantly trying to figure out, how do you make up ground? And desperation leads to terrible decisions. I've been fortunate in my life, but I've made some bad decisions. So imagine, you throw the desperation in there, you're gonna make some bad decisions that lead to, the incarceration rates that we're seeing now as well.
You guys mentioned Brian Stevenson, Coach, and you worked closely with him. He spoke at City Club in 2015, and one of the message that he delivers everywhere, and I'm sure he delivered with all of you, was, I can remember like 3 of the 4 things, right? Get proximate, get uncomfortable, and change the narrative. And I think there's a 4th thing that he talks about too, and somebody will remind us on Twitter, I'm sure. But, but by taking the team and your colleagues to Grafton, you were doing so much of that. You're getting close to the issues, right? And you're getting uncomfortable with the conversation, having the uncomfortable conversations, and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, and changing the narrative of what basketball and professional sports can do. When you got into professional sports, do you think you were going to be doing this work?
No, to be honest with you. You're in a position of leadership, and leadership doesn't get to choose the moment. And for us, this is the moment, this is the position we're in, and now it's our responsibility to do the job. And I think, you don't get to pick and choose, and that's the best part about our job is, I can't go home at night and turn the switch off and not be in a position of leadership. It's our responsibility, with all of the support that we have, to pull whoever's behind us up, and whatever situation we're facing, we got to hit it head on. And be a voice for it, and inspire other people, because that's what leadership is about, right? Mm-hmm. Leadership is about inspiration, and so that's what we're trying to do, is inspire other people to do more than maybe we're even capable of doing.
J.B. Bickerstaff is the head coach at the Cleveland Cavaliers. We're talking with him and General Manager Koby Altman and Kevin Clayton. Kevin is the Vice President of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement for the Cavs. And we're talking about professional sports and racial equity, and how professional sports teams are leaning in and trying to change the narrative. You can join our conversation when you text your question to 330-541-5794. That's 330-541-5794. You can also tweet it at the City Club, and we'll work it into the program. Kevin, you sometimes talk about sports as a Trojan horse. Mm-hmm. Say more about that metaphor.
Yeah, so when I think about the role that sports plays, and particularly professional sports, in this community, if you mention the Browns, the Indians, or Cavaliers, quite honestly, there's not a conversation with anybody or door that we can't get into just by saying that we're with the Cavs. So it's not our individual names, it's the brand name. And for us, we have a responsibility not to just go in as a sports organization, but to the extent that we can bring these social issues with us and having a conversation where we get inside, it could be the mayor's office, it could be the county executive's office, that we want to be able to go in, but yet let's bring healthcare issues with us. Let's bring education issues with us. Let's bring law enforcement issues as well. So we have an obligation, I think, is kind of being the front to a lot of these, as others can come behind us and kind of connect with the work that we're trying to get done socially.
Mm-hmm. And it's incredible, the point that Kevin brings up is, we've talked to other leadership of the other organizations.
The Indians and the Browns.
The Indians and the Browns. So Andrew Berry, by way of example, and Chris Antonetti, we've been on group chats and discussions about what we can do together as mm-hmm. organizations to lean in on this. And Coach and Kevin Stefanski have had deep discussions on what we can do, and bringing in Tito as well. And so now we're talking about something incredibly powerful with the organizations coming together, the sports organizations coming together of Cleveland, to really engage in this issue, collective initiatives, and have it be sustainable. And so we're on ongoing discussions on what we're going to do, but it's an incredibly exciting time that way, mm-hmm. To have those conversations and it be about the community.
What do you want to do?
Well, I think for us at the Cavs, and we're discussing with other organizations as well how we can affect change as a group. But with the Cavs, we sort of focused on a few buckets we think we can affect change with. And, we talk about education being a large one, and giving kids access to higher education that then leads to hiring practices and sustaining that as well. So we talked about that. We talked about police relations, and Kevin's done an amazing job along with J.B. already sort of fostering those relationships within the community. I think you've talked to the police chief already.
Another call scheduled today, matter of fact.
No, so it's incredible. And I want to say that the relationship between law enforcement is the key. It's not putting a burden on them or burden on us. It's increasing the relationship there so we can have sort of a knowledge and base of where they're coming from, where we're coming from, how we can come together as communities and work these issues out. And what's the third thing, Kevin, we're talking about? It's a relationship.
Voting, education, and law enforcement.
Obviously, the big initiative is getting everyone out to vote, getting everyone registered to vote. And Kevin can talk more about that because that's an immediate need.
Kevin, talk about that.
Yep. So one of the things that we identified that came out of just our team members and the team members from the other teams was the importance of voting. And this is not a partisan issue. I mean, we want to drive everybody to vote. And what we realize is that we have an opportunity to leverage our brand strength across the Browns, the Indians, the Cavs, with the personalities, with our facilities, to actually encourage the community to vote. And now we're talking about specifically maybe Cuyahoga County, because our building is now up for consideration for being a precinct for voting. And so we're working through that right now.
The arena, the field house.
Right, Rocket Mortgage Field House, right. So if you think about it from that perspective of what were some of the challenges in the spring, you had social distancing that was an issue, you had lines down the street. We have that beautiful atrium that can, so we're in negotiations right now to get certified for that. But it's not just the voting location, it's leading up to it. As Koby said, we have voter education, we have registration, and then there's early voting. So the county election board has done a great job of educating all three teams on what we need to do and how we can have impact. And we think that it's our civic responsibility to take a lead in this area. We're not the experts, but we have facilities and resources that can help the community.
Coach, for some reason I keep thinking of the sort of news personalities that would tell players to stop getting involved in politics and just dribble and play the game. And I'm noting in my head that you all are doing everything but that. You're doing the exact opposite, and it's very refreshing. How are the conversations with the players? Tell us about who's leading for on your team, on your squad.
The conversations are real. Going back to the conversation that Koby mentioned, almost immediately after the George Floyd murder, we had guys that we look up to who are bigger than life. They're, one in stature and personality, but we had guys on that call admitting fear. And, we had a guy who was literally sitting in his car at that time. A police officer walked by him and he got nervous. Now, if you think about how fortunate, how famous, how wealthy, go down the list that these NBA players are, but yet, one person man to man can still walk by and create a sense of nervousness and fear. It says a lot about where we are as a society and the damage that's been done in our past. And I think that's where we have to begin to educate ourselves. Like we were talking about working with Brian Stevenson, he's got the Equal Justice Initiative, which is something I think we should all check out. But he has done the research, and the museum is based on lynchings up through the 1950s. Now, if you think about those lynchings and how much trust has been lost between those people who are supposed to be protected and those people who are supposed to be protecting those people, is the police officers turned their backs and allowed lynch mobs to come in and take entire families. Sometimes the police officers were a part of those lynch mobs. So you're going back, wasn't that long ago, but you're going back generations for black people who, they pass that on. They tell their sons, they tell their grandsons. So there's a huge amount of trust that's been lost there. And that's what those guys want to understand and they want to know. Leadership has come from, all the way from Kevin Love to Darius Garland, Colin Sexton. It's been the gamut of older guys, veterans, guys that want to know. Kevin Love's first question is, how do I help? You know what I mean? And I think for him to open up, like that, and ask those questions just says a lot about his character. But you see it all over. You know what I mean? There's white males all over the place right now that are asking, how can we help? What do we need to do to support your cause? And it's eye-opening. You know what I mean? Like it's refreshing is the word you use. Like it's encouraging to see that happening and see it happening right in front of us. Like it gives me hope that we can impact the change that we're trying to see right now. So, our guys are spirited, they're passionate, and they're willing to do. You know what I mean? Like enough with the statements, it's time to do, and that's what our guys are after now.
How about with other coaches? And the ranks of NBA head coaches are diverse as well. And I know you've emerged in a leadership role among them in Coaches for Racial Justice. How are your white counterparts coming along?
They're unbelievable. I'll start with the guys that we know, right? Like Greg Popovich has been, very public about his statements long before this, right? Steve Kerr, those guys have been, on the forefront of this. But the conversations that we had, and the surprising part of it is, in our normal circles, we don't have these discussions, right? We see each other for 5 minutes before the game. We're checking on each other. We're seeing how we're doing. But we have had hour-long conversations on these topics and these issues and how we move the ball forward. Brett Brown, Quinn Snyder, Lloyd Pierce has taken a huge role in all of this. We've had, Stan Van Gundy, David Fisdale, top to bottom, white, brown, Latino, Filipino, all the coaches have come together. And that's one of the things where that first conversation we had, I left feeling so encouraged, because if our small group of 30 people could put a plan in place that could attract so much attention and impact the change we're talking about, imagine what all the other voices of the people who are coming together and the ideas and thoughts that they can have, how they can help push the ball forward too. So, I am proud to be a part of that group. I'm proud of where we are right now and the people who are moving this thing forward. And I'm excited about the opportunity that we have from the darkness that we've come from to move ourselves into the light, so to speak.
That's what's so exciting. You talk about Brian Stevenson, who's a modern-day American hero, right? He just is. When he talks about this moment in time, he says, we think this is a movement and not just a moment. And to hear that from him, this is his life, brother. He does this every single day. And to hear his hopefulness and his excitement that we have a real chance here to capitalize, that's exciting. And we're fortunate that he's helping us so much down this path.
Are you able to speak with your counterparts, your other GMs around the league, in the same way the coaches?
We have. I think they are so public facing. You think about J.B. has to, on a normal game day, forget about the climate right now.
Right.
He has to speak to the media twice a day. And he's an incredible face for the organization. And so they're out there much more. So we're behind the scenes and figure out what resources do we need as an organization to create change. And I think, fairly or unfairly, he gets the burden of having to be the public-facing piece of that. I've been out there too as well, and trying to further that message. I think, you talk about, and you have some really successful black executives at the table right now, right? And we've all had to navigate to get to the positions we're in. It's not easy. It's rare to get to these positions, and hopefully our faces create more change and more opportunity for people like us. But just myself realizing that me being in this position and being an inspiration for a community and a group, that's not good enough anymore. And I have to step outside my comfort zone and do more. Me being in this position that's not it anymore. And so I have to commit to even pushing the envelope even more and creating even more change and doing more. I think we all need to take a risk, right? You have to take a risk in whether it be anything you do, but be a part of this movement. Be a part of this. Step outside your comfort zone. Take a risk, and you'll be proud when you look back on this moment in time.
Koby Altman is General Manager of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Also with us, Kevin Clayton, Vice President for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement with the organization, and Head Coach J.B. Bickerstaff. We are, this is the City Club Friday Forum, and if you have a question, you can tweet it at the City Club and we'll work it into the program. Or you can text it to 330-541-5794. That number again is 330-541-5794. Question from our listening audience. Glad to hear the imperative to vote is among the team's priorities, especially in honor and in memory of Representative Congressman John Lewis. In what ways can sports fans and community members support and strengthen your Get Out the Vote efforts to ensure ready access to the ballot? Kevin Clayton.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. One of which is to encourage those individuals that are 18 and above to get registered. Sure. So that would be first. Secondly, is as we are identifying maybe barriers to people getting out to vote that we may anticipate, then there's early voting, in which in Cuyahoga County that's coming down to the Board of Elections to actually cast a vote in person. And there's also in Ohio, we do have mail-in voting. So encourage those people who may be discouraged about coming out, particularly in this time of COVID, that there are multiple ways in which you can vote. And really speaking up about the positiveness of voting. And as we think about this time, as you just mentioned, around kind of the Voting Act's rights and things of that nature, and the passing of our legends, it's like we owe it to those who have actually died before us. And I'm talking about everybody, not just the Black community. Everybody owes it to those who have given their lives for the right to vote. So we want to exercise that right.
Here's another question. It sounds like the Cavs are doing some great things to support and further diversity and inclusion internally and externally in the community. Are these efforts also being directed at services the organization uses, such as diversity and inclusion requirements for outside legal counsel, or making sure the Cavs legal matters are staffed by diverse attorneys, especially in light of the legal profession being historically non-diverse, particularly in regard to Black attorneys?
Yeah, so the direct answer to that is yes, we do have a strategy to engage outside vendors at multiple levels. So yes, I mean, we have a very small legal team that consists of 2 people, and there is opportunity to reach outside to bring other inside counsel in on very specific things. So yes, that is the case, and if there is a law firm that wants to partner with us or what have you, they can reach out to me and we can figure out a way to at least engage them with our legal team.
All right. Coach Bickerstaff, how will the Cavs organization leverage its influence to address issues such as police violence at the local and state level? And what will true engagement look like beyond you talking to Chief Williams on the phone, which is engagement? I mean, for real, that's real engagement. And I also want to know, what do you guys talk about?
Well, we talk about, how we can bridge the gap. We talk about how we can help. And, we were talking about trust, right? Like, how do we help build that trust? And, my passion has always been helping young people, right? And starting there and then understanding where my strength lies. Like, I know sports, right? And I know that sports can bring people together. So the conversation that we're having with Chief Williams is, how do we use sports to bring the community together with law enforcement? There is a thing, you guys have heard of the Police Athletic League, right? So we grew up playing in the Police Athletic League. He was a part of the Police Athletic League and said that was part of what inspired him to be a police officer. So there's ways to engage the community and law enforcement and, see each other as something different. Like right now, there are a lot of young Black kids who see the police as boogie monsters, to be honest with you. So getting an opportunity to see a police officer as a human being, is different. Giving a police officer an opportunity to see a young Black man as something other than, a criminal is huge. So I think you build those relationships, and that's what we're working on at the moment.
Coach, Cleveland is a, go ahead.
One thing to that, because you mentioned Chief Williams and the question was around Chief Williams, there's actually 3 African-American chiefs that are here in the Cleveland area. So it's Chief Williams of Cleveland Police Department. There's also Carolyn Williams, who oversees the Federal Reserve, and that's Cleveland and Cincinnati. And then there's Chief Sheila Mason, who is the chief of Woodmere. And the three of them also lead or the representatives for an organization that's called NOBLE, which is the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement. So there's a national platform that they are a part of, and the conversations that Coach is having connects to their platform to bring youth together with law enforcement to break down that barrier of them being the boogeyman, if you will. So it's much broader than just Cleveland. It's a whole Northeast Ohio area that we're trying to develop relationships with.
It feels important to remember and contextualize engagement with law enforcement around the killings of Tamir Rice, Timothy Russell, Melissa Williams, and there have been other moments of police brutality, and there's a consent decree currently, and then broader than that is this other conversation happening around criminal justice reform. We've spoken with the Bail Project, which is seeking to disrupt the cash bail system here in Cleveland as well as other places in America, and different aspects of criminal justice reform have been coming up a lot. Koby Altman, you mentioned before the priorities of voting, education, and engagement with law enforcement. Do you see criminal justice reform as a part of that?
I do. We learned a tremendous amount, visiting the correctional facility in Grafton, and just the inequities of the system. I was on a panel with Van Jones, who looks across party lines and has actually worked with the Trump administration to get almost 12,000 people out of jail. He doesn't care about Republican, Democrat when it comes down to this pursuit. And just listening to him and learning about the access to proper attorneys and all of that systemic racism that goes into the criminal justice system. It's really difficult to hear one, but it's part of the discussion, and it's part of making sure that we all have a fair chance. And so, that's something that goes into the discussion. Coach talked about what we're good at. What we're really good at is bringing people together. I think we're going to really lean into education. Are we going to be able to go and change policy? I'm not sure. That's hard. People are doing that every single day of their life. Well, what are we good at, and what can we affect? And I think what we're leaning in on is sort of those missions and those goals. And I'm a huge proponent in higher education, leading to access, leading to you having a chance to then get a job. Then from there, it's up to our organizations to invest in that diversity. Myself, I've been with the Cavs 8 years, and Dan. I know Dan firsthand developed me from day one to be in upper management, and that was meaningful. And so now for 3 years I've been the general manager, but from day one it was an investment in my skills, putting me on the road, doing everything I can to put me in the level of leadership that I'm in now. And I think we all need to challenge ourselves, and across the board, different organizations, different businesses are, one, the hiring, but then how are we investing in our diversity and getting them to the level of leadership positions? And so we're very focused in on, one, pre-college, how are we getting our communities ready for college? Higher education giving you a pathway to then getting the job, that dream job. And then investing in that diversity once they have the job, to then getting to becoming a congressman or a senator or a head coach or a VP or a general manager of an NBA team. That's the goal. That's the job that we're trying to have in a sustainable way.
Coach, question for you about what you've learned from the WNBA as a model for using sports as a platform for social justice. How do you hope to leverage partnerships across both leagues?
I mean, it's been powerful. Black women have been, underrepresented for a long time. And for them to have the ability and the platform, and I mean, they upped the amount of games that they put on TV, ESPN and ABC did. So think about that, in this time, they've given them even more of a platform. And I mean, we're all fighting the same fight. And the more support, the more unity we have, the louder our voices can become. But I think it's, again, you see, it makes me smile to think about it, but it's like you see all these people who are just trying to do the same thing and do what they believe is right. And, you know what I mean, like, that's encouraging. That's passion, you know what I mean? Like, that's what this is about. We talk about our civic duty. Our civic duty is, you know, to do what's right by one another. We talk about patriotism all the time. We hear that word. Patriotism is standing together against whatever evils are in our faces, right? And racism is one of the largest, if not the largest evil that we faced as a country, and we need to address it. And we've got people now that are out there and they're addressing it in a multitude of ways.
Mm-hmm. Kevin Clayton, this question about how you're handling pushback to the organization's support of Black Lives Matter. This is but it's funny. I mean, it's an important question. It's also funny. It's not like you can go to another team and start supporting that team instead.
Right, and we have had some pushback. And what we believe that our responsibility is to first to try to engage in conversation with those people who are pushing back, as well as to educate. I mean, we all have educated ourselves. We are more educated now today than prior to George Floyd's murder. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because we knew we had to engage in understanding certain elements of what's going on in the movement. So from a pushback standpoint, we try to educate first, try to, one, empathize, educate, and at that point, there could be an opportunity where if we aren't coming in agreement with how others think, mm-hmm. we're going to stand by our values as an organization.
You're okay to let it go?
We're okay to let it go.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Have you had to let anybody go? Let any say goodbye to any sponsors yet?
No, not yet. I mean, mm-hmm. so far we're engaged in communication, and it's not a large number of people that are pushing back. But we're engaging in conversation and hopefully educating and learning from each other.
There's probably some season ticket holders who are upset too.
Well, we haven't crossed that bridge yet where we've had to engage at that level, but we mm-hmm. will always stand by our values as an organization.
Mm-hmm. You've been in sports, you know, and around sports for a long time, and this is a moment when racial justice, whether it's about Black Lives Matter or it's about the name of our baseball team or the name of a football team in Washington, things are shifting so dramatically and so quickly. Often in America, you know, and I was having this conversation with a friend of mine recently about the tension between the hope that we all have for America and the despair that we're never going to see the kind of the country we aspire, you know, we hope for to actually manifest itself. Where are you on the hope-despair spectrum right now, Kevin?
Yeah, so initially, right after George Floyd, I was excited about all the different movements that were happening. You had mm-hmm. corporations that were writing big checks. Mm-hmm. You had organizations like the Redskins that are saying, hey, we're going to change our name. You had so many different things that were happening that was encouraging. I'm not discouraged. I'm optimistic that we can continue the momentum. And I just really want to continue to go back to what Koby said and what Coach said, is that this has to be sustainable. It also is more than the moment. It's really turning the moment into the movement. And I'm excited for the fact that we have opportunities like this to continue the conversation. Throughout my career, I've not seen any incident sustain itself over a period of time across so many aspects of the population. Mm-hmm. So it's not just 3 African-American men having this conversation. I've been in conversation where there were 3 white males having the conversation and the Latino community. So it's lots of different people having this conversation, and that's what encourages me.
And on that too, it's to me what I think we need to continue to focus on is it's not political, right? I think we're seeing a movement because people want to be on the side of right. And it's not right or left, it's wrong and right. And I think we're seeing these changes happen because people are aware of right and wrong. It's very easy to see. People are moving because they want to be on the right side of this, mm-hmm. on the right side of history, because I genuinely believe that people are good in nature, you know, innately. And, you know, there's certain groups of people that just don't care and they won't change. But the majority of people are good and want to see things happen in the right way. And I think now you're starting to see that wave of people are learning, people are becoming educated, and now people are becoming inspired to do, which I think is, you know, how the change will happen.
Mm-hmm. In order for the work to be sustainable or to sustain, we have to choose it every day, Koby. That's different than the work of a general manager 5 years ago. right? Choosing, in addition to like making sure you're lining up the right trades and everything like that, choosing racial equity every day is a different framework for your work.
And you have to make that commitment. You know, you have to make that commitment. And I'm fully invested in what needs to be done to make sure our organization keeps going down this path, keeps making the right investments to create this change. But this is not going to happen a year from now, 5 years from now. Like, we have to keep on down this path. And it's not just us as an organization. So the NBA just announced a week or so ago, a foundation. We have not to title it yet, but an NBA foundation. So this is from the ownership level. Mm-hmm. Each team from the ownership level is going to donate $1 million a year. So that's $30 million over the course of 10 years. So you're talking about the aggregate of almost $300 million investment in these issues. And the issue is going to be economic empowerment. And so the wealth discrepancy, obviously, between white and black populations in this country is immense. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really excited and optimistic about if we're going to tackle that problem. There's a lot of opportunity there to track it, to put metrics behind it. We talked about how can we actually track our success from a data standpoint. You know, how many jobs are we creating? How does that turn into upper management? How many scholarships are we giving out per year? How many of those kids are getting through college and onto jobs? These are things we can track. Mm-hmm. And so if we're making these big time investments into economic empowerment, which again is access, but we're talking about just access, giving people a chance to join the workforce, contribute to society, get to upper level management, create future leaders. I'm really optimistic on it. And so it's not just me, it's the league as a whole is committed, and we have to be committed for the long haul. And that 10-year commitment is not going to be enough. Mm-hmm. But let's start down the path, make the right investments, and keep moving forward.
Kevin Clayton, another question from a listener. I'm moved by the work the Cavs leadership is doing in social justice in an effort to dismantle systemic racism. Is there a plan to go into the affluent suburban school districts, which I think is code for white, or communities to educate young and older folks of disparities and influence actions for change?
Yes, so the work that we're doing in the community is not necessarily just in underserved communities and impoverished communities. Mm-hmm. I mean, almost every school system in the Northeast Ohio area, we have some sort of relationship with. And we have a community team that's reaching out to those community leaders so that we are absolutely connected, not just in what is perceived as the black community, but making sure that we are having these conversations in Shaker Heights, in Avon, and other places across Northeast Ohio.
That's great.
And you think about, our athletes. These are iconic athletes across the board. No matter how rich or poor you are, they're people's heroes. They're our heroes. And when they see our guys hurting the way they have been, preaching the message they have been, there's real opportunity here for change for everybody to be a part of it. And that's what we've seen, right? That's what we've seen with these protests. Mm-hmm. That's what we've seen across social media. Mm-hmm. Everyone wants to be a part of this change and this history and this moment in time, but make it sustainable. And that's why this thing is continuing on. And that's why I was so proud of our basketball association last night.
And just to add on to that too, is to Koby's point is, we live out in Avon Lake. Kevin and I went to a protest that was out in Avon, and it was led by some high school kids. Yeah. And to listen to them speak about the moment and what was going on, and then to watch them lead us, adults and grown folks, down the street as we marched down the street, and I had my kids with me. So it's like you're seeing these, it's not just a inner city black problem or issue, right? This issue spreads across, all colors, all races, all genders, and, to watch those kids lead us was empowering, to say the least.
That's great. That's great. There's another question, a very specific question from a listener about online learning this fall. most schools in Cuyahoga County public schools are likely moving towards remote learning. Many have already made that decision. Education is a high priority area for you. There's a massive digital divide inside of the city of Cleveland that we've spoken about at previous City Club forums. What are the plans for the organization to assist there?
Well, Kevin can talk about our parent company, Rocket Mortgage. That's a big deal for them, and that's going to trickle down to Cleveland as well. Obviously, Detroit, they're Detroit-based, but we're going to invest a ton into that space.
Yeah, and actually there is a plan in place right now where we understand the digital divide, and through Rocket Mortgage and leadership of our chairman, Dan Gilbert, we are looking at how do we bring resources to Cleveland to make sure that partnering with organizations like the Greater Cleveland Partnership and those organizations that have a plan in place. So we're in the process now of figuring out how we can connect to make sure that we can close that digital divide.
Just throw this on. Sorry,
Go
this
ahead.
is something that's extremely important to me. Is also those kids who depend on school for lunches and meals.
Yes.
That's something that we need to pay attention to too, and get a plan in place for that. So we've done work in the past with the local food bank. So those are things that we're trying to get done as well, and figure out how we can make sure that those kids are provided the nutrients that they need as well.
So I thank you all so much for your time. This has been really remarkable. Koby Altman is General Manager for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Coach J.B. Bickerstaff is Head Coach. And Kevin Clayton, Vice President for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement at the Cleveland Cavaliers. And also, as I said earlier, full disclosure, a new City Club board member. But there would be a massive round of applause right now for all of you guys. And there is. You can think of it virtually. But thank you so much for your time. I'm Dan Malthrop. Please stay strong, stay healthy, and wash your hands, keep your distance, wear a mask, please, and stay close in your hearts if you can't be close in person. Our forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC, the Chautauqua Institution, and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.